My brother Carl Jacobson and I wrote this book together. It's called Invitation to the Psalms, and we intend the book to really equip and introduce students so that they could enter into the Psalms and read them as their own. Read them for understanding with depth and clarity and mature insights. The first chapter of the book is an introduction to Hebrew poetry. I think we call the chapter, Why is My Bible Repeating Itself? The basic rhythm of Hebrew poetry is foreign to most North Americans. The basic feature of Hebrew poetry is parallelism, where one line happens and then a second line is, as we say, in parallel with it. For instance, in Psalm 13, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? So that example of just the parallelism, what we do in the chapter is we introduce students to parallelism, and then they get many chances on their own to practice it and learn how to engage with it. The second chapter is an introduction to the genres of the Psalms that work according to similar form. There are two types of genres broadly in the book of Psalms. Those types of genres that are identified because they have similar forms and shapes, and a second type of genre which have similar themes. In chapter 2, where we introduce genres that have similar forms, we introduce students to the lament psalms, praise psalms, thanksgiving psalms, and trust psalms. And then in chapter 3, we introduce students to those types of genres that have common themes: royal psalms, creation psalms, wisdom psalms, and so on. Especially in chapter 2, the idea is that you have to know what you're reading in order to really understand it, right? So that you can have an identical sentence occur in two different psalms, but if it's occurring in the midst of a prayer for help or a lament psalm, it will have a different texture and meaning than the exact phrase that might occur in a trust psalm. So the idea is that words only mean what they mean in the contexts in which they occur. One of my cousins had a funny story about that. He drove out to a convenience store on Thanksgiving Day because he needed to get a couple things that were missing for Thanksgiving meal, and he parked in a parking spot, and then he got really mad because in front of him on the sign it said holiday parking only, and so he was kind of ticked off. Why would there be a sign you could only park in this place on a holiday? Because it was Thanksgiving. His daughter, right, because his daughter's a lot smarter than he is, said, no, Dad, it's the name of the store. It's holiday parking. It's for the holiday store, right? But that's a silly example of how context takes, that words mean what they mean in context. And by paying attention and being equipped to understand the context, one is better equipped to understand the words. Then in chapter 4, we introduce students to the idea of the speakers of the Psalms. Who are the psalmists? What is the persona that one could imagine speaking these various poems? And then to what degree can one come alongside of a psalm and speak a psalm as if they're my words, and that the psalms are given to us to speak for ourselves? Chapter 5, we deal with the rich metaphors of the Psalms. So much of the power of the Psalms is their imagination and the metaphor and the imagery. And because the Psalms are imaginative poems, one has to use imagination to read them. And finally, in the last chapter of the book, we talk about the theology of the Psalms. The Psalms are about God, and they're about Israel's God. They're a witness to who this God is and what life in relationship with this God is like. And that's what we handle in the last chapter.